This day is the day, a bad luck's always coming my way.
For today's Grimm adventure, we have to go back to March 9th, 1963 to walk the steps of a crime that started here in Hollywood, California and ended just outside of Bakersfield in an onion field. The crime became known around the world as the Onion Field Murder, the Onion Field Killing even. And there was a book written about it. The book became a movie starring Ted Danson and James Woods. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on. But today, we're going to be visiting all of the crime scene locations from here to Bakersfield, to the actual spot where Officer Ian Campbell was shot and killed. Officer Ian Campbell was the only victim, and he's buried here in this cemetery. Now before we head out to the crime scenes and even further all the way up to Bakersfield where the onion fields were, I wanted to stop by the cemetery because this is where you'll find the final resting place of Officer Ian Campbell. Over here at the top of the Eventide section, near the road overlooking Los Angeles and Glendale, I can see the Griffith Observatory off in the distance on the hillside. But it's a peaceful little plot here. Now, like I said, Officer Ian Campbell was the only person that was killed that night, the only person that was murdered. And throughout this video, we were going to talk a lot about what happened. But you have to remember that truth is often, quite often, scarier than fiction. With that being said, there is a book that came out called The Onion Field. It's a great book. And if you're not a reader, there's a movie that came out called The Onion Field that stars James Woods and Ted Danson. But right over here is the final resting place of Officer Ian Campbell. Ian Campbell, 1931 to 1963. Lo, I am with you always. In this video, we are going to talk about how Ian Campbell died, how he was murdered out in the onion field. We're actually going to go to the exact location. But I didn't want to talk about it here. Instead, I just kind of wanted to come and pay, our respects and show you that it's an actual real place. And what I mean by that, a lot of times whenever you find out about true crime stuff, depending on where you are in the world, it's a book or an article, or you see a little video on TikTok or something like that, or you watch a documentary on Hulu. I'm obsessed with them, and you might be too. And you kind of forget that these are real people, that these are real stories. And this one here is a doozy, so hang on. When I first came across the headstone, I was like, wait a second, did somebody deface the actual stone itself? You see all these markings right here. I was like, man, I mean, I've seen stranger things, but it's actually the blades from a lawnmower. Whenever they cut the grass, it's all nicked up. Other than that, it's a simple, beautiful tombstone. Well, let's talk about the movie, The Onion Field, for just a moment. It came out in the year 1979, and it stars James Woods and Ted Danson, everybody's favorite bartender from the TV show Cheers. It's a pretty good movie. It follows the book. It's a movie based on the book of the same name, which is based on the crime. And the trailer for it is probably one of my favorite trailers for any true crime dramatization movie ever made.
Any cop who gives up his gun to some punk is a coward.
He's got a gun in my back. Give him yours, Carl.
9 p.m. Los Angeles, California. Petty criminals Greg Powell and Jimmy Smith forced police officers Ian Campbell and Carl Hettinger to an abandoned onion field.
We told you we were going to let you go, But have you ever heard of the Little Lindbergh Law?
Do you know what the Lindbergh Law is?
Kidnapping carries capital punishment.
You're wrong. Up until the moment the first shot was fired, the Little Lindbergh Law didn't apply.
I'm just a thief! I'm no cop killer! Why the hell would I lie? What could I gain?
You can stand silent on the Fifth Amendment.
John Savage is Officer Carl Hettinger. Ted Danson is Officer Ian Campbell. James Woods, the actor, portrays Greg Powell, the criminal. Franklin Seals, the actor, portrays Jimmy Smith, the criminal. The book is a bestseller. The screenplay is by the author.
We have now seen what the onion field looked like on the night of March 9th.
What happened in the onion field is true, but the real crime is what happened after. Joseph Wumbaugh's The Onion Field. A true story.
So what exactly happened the night of March 9th, 1963? Well, two plainclothes police officers were on patrol here in Hollywood, Officer Ian Campbell and Officer Carl Hettinger. And they noticed a suspicious car driving through the streets. And I read a couple different things. The first one being that they pulled them over because they noticed a light, like a bulb above the license plate was burnt out. And the other one being that they pulled a U-turn where they weren't supposed to. Now, I am guessing that to the officers, this felt like a typical traffic stop, a normal traffic stop that they've done countless times before. But on this night in particular, March 9th, 1963, everything changes. So this is the intersection of Carlos and Gower Street, right in the heart of Hollywood, and this is where they pulled over that suspicious vehicle. In fact, they parked right in front of this building that's to the right-hand side. And there's a black truck parked right there right now. Now, inside the vehicle were two guys, Gregory Powell and Jimmy Smith. And whenever the cops came up to the car and had them get out, they didn't know it that both men actually had guns. They got the drop on the police. One of the guys put the gun up against the back of Ian Campbell, the only guy who was shot and killed during all of this. And Ian Campbell tells his partner, hey, they got guns, give them your weapon. And Hettinger, his partner, was very reluctant, so he says. And interesting thing about this, after all this was said and done, the other police officers really gave him a lot of guff, or gruff, if you will, because you never give up your weapon, but he did. So Hettinger gives up his gun, and now that Gregory Powell and Jimmy Smith have both police officers in their control, they kidnap them. They get them in their car, and then they drive up the highway like 90 minutes towards Bakerfield to the middle of an onion field, hence how the name, the Onion Field Murder, the Onion Field Killings began. Because this is a very busy intersection, I had to get the shot very quickly by running out in the middle of the street. But there's a crime scene photo that was taken of the patrol car, the unmarked patrol car parked right here in front of these houses. And this is how it looks today. And the fun thing about this, the buildings are the same, as well as the light post right there, as well as the crosswalk signs. And they changed a little bit, but they're in the same exact spot. They look almost identical back to 1963. At the time of recording this, it is 2023. And this square is now known as the Ian Campbell Square. I'm not entirely sure when that went into effect, but it's nice to see that there's something here talking about that. There's a couple of different signs, one over by the church and then one actually on the light pole that was right next to the car, the patrol car that was stopped. Pretty wild, right here in the heart of Hollywood. After Powell and Smith kidnapped the officers, they drove them about 90 miles north to some onion fields on the outskirts of Bakersfield, which is exactly where we are right now. From here on out, we're going to do our best to try to locate exactly where this crime took place, where everything happened and where Ian Campbell was shot, using what we know from the book, some notes, as well as some crime scene photographs. The first sign that we are in the right spot is this sign right here that says warning, high pressure gas line. And the reason that this is important is because back in 1963, whenever this crime took place, they were digging the gas line, and in some of the crime scene photos, you can actually see the ditch in the background with the officers standing there. Now, what's really important, even more important about this, is the night that this happened. Powell and Smith drove the officers out here, and they got off the highway and they drove out into the onion fields, and they couldn't go any further. The road led straight to a trench, which was the gas line to be. And they turned around, did a U-turn, and instead of driving back, they had to figure out something to do with the officers that they just kidnapped. Now, the highway that you see is the highway that they took out of Hollywood all the way up here towards Bakersfield. And it's important to note that certain parts of the highway are actually dedicated to Ian Campbell. I mean, they do that a lot with different officers, but especially this one here. Now, this gas line right here is actually very important because it acts as a pointer. Now, if we were to come over here and stand this way and just kind of look out across the highway and the fields, that is where we are going. We're going to try to find it. I can see those, the lines out there, the power lines. That's pretty close to where we need to be, baby goal. So we got a little bit of an adventure here to try to track down the exact spot. We finally found the dirt road that takes us back to where we need to be, and we notice that there's another trench over here on the right-hand side of the car, the right-hand side of the road. That's not the trench that we're looking for. Back in 1963, the gas line trench actually went across the road, which they would have been driving just like we are right now, and they couldn't go any further because it just kind of cut them off. This is pretty wild being out here. It looks like instead of onion fields, now it's grapes. Now, it didn't take us too long to figure out which way the car was driving down here through the onion fields. It was actually the same direction that Jessica is walking. And like we said earlier, they couldn't go further down this back road because they came to a ditch. The gas line that we're talking about that they were digging back in 1963, we're going to show you where it was. It's clearly marked. But this is it. It's pretty crazy to be here. I mean, out of all the places, out in the middle of nowhere, truly in the middle of nowhere, right up here. So let me try to map out this as best as I possibly can. If we were to keep going across this field, it would take us to where we were standing next to the highway and we're showing you the gas lines. It's almost a straight line. Remember how we were talking like it was going to be an arrow? It cuts right across this road right here. You can see that yellow marker. And if I stand right here and just kind of pivot the camera, right across this road, warning, high pressure gas line. Crazy how this works, right? Tracking all this down. The sun is playing tricks on us, darting in and out behind the clouds. But try to picture this. Right now, I am standing on the other side of where the gas line trench was being dug in 1963. Again, you can see both markers on both sides of the road here. Now, that night, they were driving just the way that Jessica was walking, and they couldn't go any further because of the trench, so they stopped and they turn around. And when they do this, Ian Campbell is ordered out of the car. For some reason, they had him driving from Hollywood all the way up here to Bakersfield. And when he gets out of the car, he's standing pretty much right where Jessica is standing, right up against the trench. And Powell walks over to Campbell. They say a few different things, and Powell shoots Campbell in the face, and he falls to the ground right there. He's the only person to be shot, the only person to be killed, and murdered that night, hence the name Onion Field killing, Onion Field murder. Now when this happens, his partner, Hedinger, breaks free and he runs across the road out into the onion fields. It's a full moon that night, so everything is well lit, and the two criminals are shooting after him, trying to get him as he runs down through this way. Again, they weren't grapevines then, it was an onion field. But eventually he gets away. He makes it to a farmhouse to safety. As Hedinger is running through the onion fields, he hears 4 more shots off in the distance, and it turns out they turned around and they shot Ian Campbell 4 more times. Now, it's known for certain that Powell was the guy who shot Ian Campbell in the face, but for the other shots, both criminals blamed each other. A couple of days after this, on March 11th, the police come back up here to try to get a better understanding as to what happened that night. And this time, they bring Jimmy Smith. And there were a bunch of photographs that were taken that day. And in the photos, you can see Jimmy Smith standing there in a long coat, and he's got his hands in handcuffs. And what I find very interesting, you can see how clear, how desolate, how empty all of this is. I mean, we got, I think there are lemon trees on the left right now. We got grapes over there to the right. Pretty much the only thing that stays the same, that has stayed the same, is the mountain in the background, as well as these telephone poles. There's a few new ones. And I mean by that, if you look very closely at some of these photos, you can see that mountain range off in the distance. If you look closely, you can match it up, all the different grooves, but there's 1, 2, 3 telephone poles. The third one, which is right near the trench, which is right here, has been torn down for whatever reason. It looks like the grapevines are actually closer to the road over here. Pretty much right where Jessica's standing. And we know this because looking down here, we can see some new telephone poles. I mean, come on, 1963 to 2023. Of course, some things are gonna change. Right now we are heading over to the farmhouse where Hedinger ran to safety. And I had to stop and show you this. I mean, look how beautiful this is. Now, as beautiful as it is, put yourself back in 1963. So right about there, way off in the distance is where the crime happened, where Ian Campbell was shot and killed. And Hedinger, in the middle of the night, ran through the fields with people shooting at him all through this. I mean, it's a long way to go. And the farmhouse is somewhere over here. You can see some houses if you look very closely. Now, I point this out because according to the book, according to the records, according to Hedinger, he was in the back seat, cramped. Like he was crouched down and his legs were cramped and falling asleep when all this happened. And whenever Ian Campbell got out of the car and they shot him, his legs were kind of numb, like they were falling asleep. So he ran this entire field. I mean, talk about adrenaline, right? He ran all of this to escape. Now I find this crazy insane. In the middle of the night, 1963, Hedinger runs 4 miles through onion fields lit only by the moon to a farmhouse. And that farmhouse is down this road right here. This is where he reported the crime, where he found safety. And the two crooks, they actually split up. Powell chased after Hedinger on foot, and Smith drove the car around the back roads looking for him, trying to find him. So as he was running the 4 miles to this farmhouse, he would see headlights off in the distance, and he would duck down. Whenever he ran into the farmer who lived here, they would see the headlights and they would duck down. But eventually they made it out okay. Even though Hedinger made it to safety and he survived that night, things got really, really bad. Things got really, really sad. You see, pretty much everybody on the police force blamed Hettinger for Ian Campbell's death because, you know, a cop never gives his weapon no matter what. And because he gave his weapon down there in Hollywood, they never let him live it down. And eventually, through depression and whatnot, he got fired from the police force, I do believe. And I think it might have been part of it, but I know that he got caught shoplifting. I wasn't sure if that was before or after he got fired from the police department, from the police force, but crazy, right? It really is beautiful and peaceful out here. It's hard to imagine that back in 1963, this crime took place. And they wrote a book about it. A movie was made from that book. It's just surreal to me to visit these locations. And with that being said, thank you for joining us on another Grimm adventure, this time telling the story of the Onion Field murder. Until next time, happy Halloween.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.